has been a murder, and you are a suspect.
Okay.
There's been a murder. A murder in Florida.
We thought it would be fun to somewhat formally review all of the Her Interactive Nancy Drew games, giving our unique perspectives on them.
Because in case you couldn't tell, the differences between he and I is that he has long hair and I have short hair.
I have my hair in a ponytail right now, so you can't quite...
There we go. Boom. So basically, I am, believe it or not, despite being shorter than him. What am I, 5? But I am the elder sister. I'm on a booster seat, basically. But I am the older sister to my little brother. And I grew up reading Nancy Drew books, and he grew up throwing cars down the staircase. So we've got
the Nancy Drew games that they played, I was too young at the time to really get anywhere in them, but I still enjoyed playing them.
Both of us kind of grew up with, like, I was in my teens, I think, by the time I discovered, like, 4 games, and those were the only 4 that I had access to until I was older. I have played the complete series, as has Peter. We're replaying them now. I have actually replayed all of them except Tomb of the Lost Queen.
Ooh, Shadow. That
for
could be a
like
problem.
for like different reasons. But anyway, we have very different perspectives, not only on Nancy Drew, but on video games themselves.
Video games, works of fiction, just the whole gamut. I mean,
we are amicable, but we disagree.
We are very close friends who are also siblings.
Don't touch me.
But, you know, we have different perspectives on things.
And we thought that maybe you might be interested in seeing how 2 very different people weigh in on the exact same media. And so to kick things off, we are starting with the very first Nancy Drew, not the remake, which is Secrets Can Kill. And we are going to be structuring this under some easy to handle and digest categories. And the first category is setting. So welcome to Florida, where Nancy is staying with her Aunt Eloise while she works on her first case in the Her Interactive series. While Aunt Eloise's home is where you begin, the majority of your time is spent in the Paso del Mar High School. You'll also split your time with Maxine's Diner and Vandalay Pharmaceuticals. Vandalay Pharmaceuticals is not a setting, it is a backdrop for one scene.
Yeah, there's one 5-second scene that happens
It's
there
going to replay 1,000 times.
And at the end, that's where the final confrontation is.
And it looks fine. Like, it's boring, it's dull, it's bland, it's flat, but this is a very early game.
I will say this game has a mixture of 2D drawn and 3D rendered assets. And for the most part, it works fine, at least for the environments. Do you remember that collapsible dollhouse of ours made out of yarn or something?
Oh, gosh.
That's what it reminds me of. It looks like it's made out of felt.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole game, you can see it definitely there, but the whole game, to me, has a very fuzzy look to it.
What it is, like for most of the game, it's kind of low resolution and is probably using JPEG compression, which would give it a somewhat fuzzy appearance in places.
Right, but I think that for your point about Vandalay is that there's just nothing there. Like, the colors are all basically the same.
Yeah,
it's just line art. Whereas in the diner, there are all these different colors, and pops of detail, there's posters.
And it's also this, and Vandalay Pharmaceuticals, it's also this unnatural tan color.
Yes.
Where it's like no actual building is that color exactly.
Here's where I'll say we are Minnesota kids. I don't know. Maybe buildings in Florida, maybe they look like that. Like, I'm gonna throw on my skepticals, though, and say that I don't feel like they did a ton of research. In fact, this could be set literally anywhere. The only reason we know it's in Florida is because the game says it is so. And on the mini-map where you choose where you're going, they've just put a lot of comically sized palm trees just everywhere. They're like, oh shoot, this doesn't look Florida enough. Palm trees. Boom, 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 boom. Vandalay Pharmaceuticals is the worst in terms of setting, but Maxine's Diner it's beautiful. It's so corny to be there because you feel like you're on the set of Happy Days. And you're just like, what even is this? Did you have anything else to say about that? Because the Happy Days thing is like, that is
I put down that the diner might as well not even exist, since you get one item from there, and then it's not relevant for the entire rest of the game, except to set up a red herring.
The diner exists solely to be a different place to talk to one character.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about Aunt Eloise's place before we get to the school. Aunt Eloise's house, I'd say, looks the best of, like, any of the environments, just because it feels like this is legitimately a person's home. Like, it's got a good layout, it makes sense, like, visually you know where you are in both of the 2 rooms that Nancy is allowed to be in. That's all I have to say about Aunt Eloise's place.
Yeah,
it looks nice.
It isn't anything special, and I would be arguing that it should have been cut like the diner if it weren't that it serves its purpose really well. It's a really good starting location.
Right, you get to learn how to navigate in that space, and I think that's important. If anyone's keeping track, Vandalay Pharmaceuticals doesn't matter except for one very brief scene. The diner doesn't really matter except for one item and talking to a person. And Aunt Eloise's house doesn't matter except for getting a couple items and learning to move around. So you might be wondering, what does matter? And that would be the school. Almost all of the important things are in the school. 3 of the suspects are located there. Might I say the only piece of real evidence? And it looks fine. It looks okay. It's a weird layout, so I remember as a kid I got lost all the time. Then watching this kid replay it, he got lost like all the time. And it's like, no, the other hallway, keep turning.
I'm gonna touch on some of those problems in the gameplay section.
Right.
But part of the problem is that the school is it's a very boring location. You have a ton of same looking hallways. That's where the majority of the game is, but I think it really shows off how little game there actually is.
In its defense, it looks like a school. After being there for a while, you're like, get me out. And so it's simultaneously a good thing and a bad thing. So yeah, you spend the majority of your time in a generic high school.
The only environment that I liked, the only setting that I kind of liked in this game was the school's boiler room, which, even though I find it really cool, it is insanely anachronistic. You get there from the inside, you get there by entering this antique-looking industrial elevator.
This school needs to be condemned.
It's so out of place.
It is. A lot of things in this game are out of place.
The library, I hate the library. The layout is really weird. Like, I don't think it would make sense even in real life.
In gameplay terms, it's terrible.
Yeah.
But in visuals, it's beautiful, and it's probably one of my favorite locations in the game.
Really?
Yeah, I loved that library as a kid, and I still like it now. I just don't like having to operate within it because of the gameplay, but we'll cover that later. The characters in Secrets Can Kill are two-dimensional, not only in terms of their animation, but also in terms of their personalities. Aunt Eloise exists only as a concept, so Nancy has a place to stay. We never see her.
And despite having a safe, has
Her
mad
passport.
cash.
Yes.
In a hollowed out book with a passport, like she's planning a hasty retreat from the country.
She is the most interesting character in this, and she's not in the game. We're just like, I'm staying at my Aunt Eloise's house. And that's it. That's why she exists. So that there's a reason why we're in somebody's
see her
house.
Or anything, just...
And that's why it's not weird that we're poking around, going through her stuff.
Yeah.
But that brings us then to Daryl Gray, the first person that we really hear about in the game. He is a sleazy creep who can't stop flirting with Nancy. Any thoughts?
Your summary kind of summed up my first point, which was that he was just way too flirty.
Yeah, he was very annoying to talk to.
And no matter what he was talking about, he always had this huge grin on his face.
That ties into this, because I said he looked like a Saturday morning cartoon character.
Yeah, it was really awful whenever
Yes.
they had him talking about, like, more serious stuff.
Because in case you can't tell from the title, this is murder.
Yeah.
But guys gotta flirt with girls. Jake Rogers is a bit more complicated, and that'll be covered later. Next we have Hal Tanaka. He is a stereotypical representation of a Japanese high schooler being pressured by his parents to do well in school. It feels uncomfortable.
Yeah, he felt... And here's the thing, I'm not necessarily against stereotypes. If they're like this, where it's like it's not necessarily harmful to have, you know, an Asian exchange student who's really into his studies. That doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. But they also didn't do anything else with him. It was just the stereotype.
Yes, all he was that. That was the entirety of his personality.
Yeah.
I will say the only thing I will say in favor is that he's got probably the nicest voice in the thing. Like,
I mean, yeah.
I feel like everyone else is trying to sound like a cartoon character, and it gets annoying.
I mean, I guess he does.
He sounds
feel like the
closer
most
to just...
honest voice.
Yes.
Doesn't-
Speaking of stereotypes, we have Connie Watson. She is the girl character in this story, and that's about as far as they take her character.
Yeah, pretty much. Her voice seemed kind of mismatched to her character. Like, of all of them...
because they got, like, I don't know, a 30-year-old woman to voice a high school girl. And they were trying to make her sound... I'm taking over this. She's not like other girls. And I hate that because it's supposed to be endearing to us females to be like, see, you can like this character because she's not like other girls. She doesn't wear pink. She wears pleated pants and a button up. Like, she doesn't look like a high schooler. She doesn't even really look like a college student unless that person is like, I don't know. Like, who dresses like she does? And then, for no reason, a giant pendant with Crane written on it. And you'd think that's important because the game draws a lot of attention to it. It's not important. It's just another quirk because the not like other girls girl has to be quirky and different. And she's got short hair, which we'll get into later. And yeah, I'm kind of taking over this section, but I'm very passionate about like this particular thing because this is her interactive, whose catchphrase was for girls.
For girls who aren't afraid of a mouse. I was trying to remember.
Yes,
and then a little icon of a computer mouse, which is adorable.
It's super cute, but like. Also kind of like, come on, the girls aren't afraid of computers, it's just that nobody is really making things targeted toward their interests. And that's what you'd think that her interactive would be doing, and largely they do. But Connie Watson is the only female character in this cast. Aunt Eloise does not count. Nancy Drew does not count. She is the protagonist. In terms of characters you interact with, the phone contacts don't count.
I don't know if we even had phone contacts in this
I think
one.
we did. I think we just didn't call them. But she's the only female character in a game targeted toward girls, which wouldn't normally be a bad thing, but she's also just this flat nothing to her. Like, what does Connie like? Do you know what Connie likes? Connie likes Daryl. Because girls cannot without crushing on someone. Like, oh my gosh, every girl has to be... And it's so annoying.
Yeah, and admittedly, even the Japanese exchange student, even though he wasn't anything more than his cliche, he still had more depth from that cliche than she did.
She's literally just girl character who is strong, and we will get into that point later.
Yeah. I will say before we move on to the next character, I felt like her voice acting was the most stilted out of any of them. It felt like it sounded like the voice actor was struggling to do her voice.
I'm wondering if they just couldn't hire females to do voice acting, because there's problems with the female voice acting in like a couple
the early ones specifically, as far as I know. As far as we've played, like the early ones,
they're a little rough.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say about her for now until we get to the mystery. Mm-hmm. Then we have Hector Hulk Sanchez is the jock. And that's it.
Yeah.
There is one more character, but since the game doesn't care about him, I'll leave him for later too.
Yeah. We both are going to have words, I'm sure, about that.
But rest assured, it's not a girl.
So yeah, we've already touched on this, but voice acting across the board is not the greatest.
Yes, but I do love that all of the characters go, I need to go now, to make Nancy go away. And then they're like, I need to go now.
As funny as it is, I do find it highly irritating.
Oh yeah, it breaks the entire illusion to have football jock angrily be like, how dare you? I've gotta go now. Well, actually,
hey, Nancy.
No, like, I don't like pushy girls. Because she's a girl.
Yeah.
Get it? So she's pushy. Although Nancy's a different bag of beans, but... I need to go now. Opens up a magazine.
Yeah. Like, they pulled that joke in The Office.
Number 1.
I'm going into labor.
There is not much to say about any of the characters, honestly, because aside from functioning as suspects, they themselves as characters don't have anything going on. Everything about them exists only to further the mystery.
Yeah. And is it just me, or do they all feel like they're just a bit too old for school?
Yeah.
Because, like, throughout playing this, I remember having to constantly remind myself, this is a high school, not a college.
It doesn't help that Hal is always talking about his scholarship and being afraid of losing his scholarship. Yeah, they're all varying shades of definitely not a teenager. But because they are 2D animated, their movements and expressions are so much better than any other Nancy Drew game. I said it. Come at me.
Okay.
We don't have this awkward, like, robot.
Okay. I'll actually say that they are pretty well done compared to other adventure games from the time. Like, I'd say they're about average to above average. But they don't, to me at least, they don't feel quite right in the 3D environments.
Well, no, because they're two-dimensional.
Yeah, and...
Through and through.
It did allow them to be more expressive, and for them to have more animated sequences than the next several games. Because they did get better throughout all the years that they made Nancy Drew games, they did have smoother animations and all of that.
Until the end.
But those smooth 2D animations were also probably why the game had to be streamed from 2 CDs. I have one more. Correct me if I'm wrong.
You're wrong.
But this game has more casual sexism in it than I would expect from a video game targeted at girls.
Give me 5, brother. I didn't want to go on a full tangent or anything. Yeah. No, you're not wrong.
Yeah, because, like, the girl... It's like every cartoon from the time. Her personality is girl.
Yeah.
And you have the diner creep, who is constantly flirting with you, and you have the jock, who is the generic jock womanizer.
There is a lot of that kind of thing in a lot of things. It gets depressing.
I wonder when I rewatch this if I can see the moment your soul left you.
It's because you stepped on a landmine. Because that's not like Survivor. The first time, it's like, this is cool. I just have to stop. There's one point, it's amazing. I don't know if all men are just like this, or if they only bring on misogynists to play on Survivor. Because this dude, unironically, just told the camera how happy he was being all male tribe. Because don't get me wrong, I don't hate women. They're good for making out and cuddling and talking to me, so they don't feel like my needs. But when they're talking to each other, I don't like that. And he goes honestly because he was talking to the other girl, and the poor fat male egos couldn't walk themselves away from this horrific. So he just stepped off. So we're not even talking about this last
If you want to be perhaps a bit off topic here, but I am glad that I correctly identified an issue with this game.
Yeah. It's one of those, you don't want to point out that the background is green, you know, because, like, everyone is aware of this, and that's kind of just... Are games kind of, like, unintentionally sexist? Yes! Yes, they are! All the angry nerd boys in the comments.
You hope it's unintentional.
Yeah.
I will say, this is far from the worst game I've ever played. For first off, the one
No.
girl character is clothed.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible.
That's better than like
He's dressed like an accountant.
99% of fantasy games.
The men will get full plate armor with the legs, the everything. And the girls, I want to see girls in bikinis.
Yeah, and like even in the adventure game genre, I mean, there's Laura Bow too. And that's all I'm going to say. But
we got
it's
to
still
move
disappointing.
on because I could literally just have an entire TED talk about the misogyny in media.
Yeah, maybe we'll get to that one day, but
The world is not ready. But that brings us to murder.
murder.
Murder, or should I say, the mystery.
The plot and mystery section.
These were originally going to be two different sections because I viewed them as two different things, but he also does, but in different ways, and so it's just
we
the
drew
same
the
thing.
line at different points, and
it
was
easier
just
to merge.
easier to combine them into the same category.
So the mystery and plot. Jake Rogers was found dead in the high school. Assuming it was murder and he didn't just beat himself up and fall down the stairs, they call in Nancy Drew to work undercover as a student to find the murderer.
Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah, and credit where credit is due, this is a solid mystery. This game has a solid mystery because every suspect is a suspect for a good reason. Like, none of them are just like, they are present, and so maybe they did it.
I will say that I felt like the mystery at a certain point devolved into, who didn't want him dead?
Oh, yeah, like, as you're talking to people, you're like, what can you tell me about Jake Rogers? Jake Rogers was the worst person on the planet and we're throwing a parade. Hooray! He's dead!
Yeah.
Like, no one even pretends to be sad. They're just like, it was weird and awkward, but he sucked. And to jump into why, because I think we can't really discuss this without saying why.
Yeah, probably.
Jake was blackmailing every single character for different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And to just run through those, Hal, this is the most boring one, so we're starting off with this one. He cheated on a test, copied his paper, and Jake set up 5 different cameras in the library to capture all the different angles of Hal writing down instead of just taking the book that he copied from. Connie is being blackmailed because she pretended to be a man to win money at a judo tournament, which it's a good thing that judo isn't something where you're in close physical contact with other people, because otherwise there'd be no way Connie would have been able to pass herself off as a man. They might have stolen this idea from a real-life incident that occurred when, in 1959, a woman by the name of, I'm sorry if I pronounce it wrong, Rina Kanakogi did this. She entered a men's judo thing because there wasn't, I think, at that time, a women's league. Cut her hair short, the whole 9 yards. And she was an alternate on her team, stepped in, she won the match, the team won the contest, and was then pulled aside by the organizer and asked if she was a woman. So she was immediately found out, and the medal was stripped away. Which is not what happened in this. Connie is just that good.
It feels slightly heavy-handed girl power.
Yes.
To me.
This is girl power as written by men, which is sad because I don't believe that her interactive things were written by men.
I suspect that this game was written by a woman.
Here's my thing. It would make sense to me that her interactive would have a largely female staff creating games targeted at young girls. But yeah, this is like the stupidest form of girl power where she's a strong female character. Not in that she's a character, but in that physically Physically, she is strong and she can hit you. That makes her interesting, I guess, and a good role model for young girls because punching people is cool. I am saying this as a woman who has been in martial arts. As a woman. It is rare to see a woman who's better than, like, the most fit guys. And because there's a reason that the sports are divided into men and women leagues. And so Connie entering the men's judo tournament because they offer more money and she wanted to win enough money to pay for her first year of college. And she did. She won. Yay. But then Jake had a hovering camera in front of her car catching her taking off her disguise. And apparently this was one of those judo competitions where you get to wear a ninja mask, so that was cool.
Oh yeah, like I also put down, would they have really given cash to her without any form of identification?
Yeah,
like,
no.
That sounds highly, highly questionable.
If it was like $10, but she says that this was enough to
cover college for 1 year.
Yeah, like, oh my gosh, no.
Even in the late 90s, that would have been a considerable amount of cash. I'm having a hard time breathing.
It would have been a check. Her entire thing boils down to she's stronger than boys and, I don't know, has short hair.
Yeah.
Which brings us on to Hulk was being blackmailed because he stole steroids to recover from an injury. He does sports. That's it.
And also, in case you haven't noticed, literally every character that you interact with in the school, their motivation for doing what they were later blackmailed for was to get money for college.
Yeah, because he wants a football scholarship. The real bad guy here is college.
Darn right.
And Jake. Jake stunk.
College and societal pressure.
Woo!
I wanted to point out that Nancy asks some, like, even for her interactive game, some remarkably dumb questions in this game.
Yeah.
How? You're introduced to someone, and your first, like, hey Deb, what's your name?
Deb.
Deb?
See
how weird that is? You sound
racist.
You sound at best like you're an idiot, and at worst, like you're racist or sexist or something. You're communicating that you're looking down on the person, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, it's... Nancy overall is like not... If you loved Nancy Drew from the books, at least the books I grew up reading, the yellow backs, hardcover yellow binded books. I don't know what they're called. They're like a billion series.
Like,
I don't know.
Or like the
Whatever.
original.
Not the original. Like, I read the originals too, but there were more of these. This is not that Nancy Drew. That Nancy Drew was very deeply compassionate and trying to help others. And this Nancy Drew bullies people whose moms have died. And we'll get to that game. But like she's mean and like invasive, and she is a pushy person.
And we should mention that, because I'm sure someone will like argue, well, you don't have to ask those questions.
You do.
These games are structured in a way that you have to exhaust all your dialogue options, because unless you know how the game is scripted, there's no way of knowing when the game will just prevent you from progressing from not talking to someone about something.
Dead ends are a real problem in Nancy Drew games, and oh my gosh. And every once in a while a game will shake things up by making it so that if you ask one specific question, the game self-destructs because no, Nancy wasn't supposed to
We'll
ask.
get to that in the gameplay section. For now, though, so at one point you have to break into the teacher's lounge. You have, And I actually rewatched the intro. You have not only your aunt, who is apparently a teacher at the school, you have not only her permission to enter the teacher's lounge, and her key for the teacher's lounge, if I recall correctly, but you also have the principal's permission to investigate this murder. And you aren't allowed to just go in through the door because Connie is in the room.
Literally always there.
Yeah, literally always there. So you have to go around the back of the school, cut a hole in a window with a box cutter, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
And open the window.
It's
You have
dumb.
the principal's permission to investigate this murder. I can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah,
There's
and
no reason why you should have to do that.
her interactive apologists will say, well, obviously you have to do it, otherwise Connie would be suspicious. And it's like, no, you just say, yeah, my aunt works here and I need to go get a paper for her.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many plausible ways that you could go about just walking in through the door, and it would have made so much more sense if she was hired by, like, Jake's parents, or just somebody who doesn't have any influence in the school.
Or, honestly, even if it was only Aunt Eloise, that would make a little more sense, but she expressly said in the introduction that the principal asked her to investigate it.
Yeah, so, like, just ask for the records, if nothing
Yeah.
else. Like, there's a lot of stuff that happens in this for no other reason than it's a game, and they realized that there wasn't any gameplay, and so they made up nonsense.
At a certain point, you get locked in the aforementioned anachronistic boiler room.
And it's gonna explode!
Yeah, and it's
As
gonna
boilers
explode.
do.
But Nancy just shrugs it off immediately. There
You know
are
how
literally
deaths be.
no dialogue options after that event.
No.
It is never addressed.
No, but it is very funny then to play future games where she just completely overreacts over things, where it's like, okay, girl, you've been through worse than this. Like, this is bad, but you've been through worse, and you handled it just fine.
And we've mentioned that the dead guy was blackmailing literally everyone he could get dirt on. And I just put down, he was surprisingly enterprising for a high school bully.
Yeah, like, oh my gosh.
Just
At least
blackmailing one person is impressive enough, but this is like...
He has drones with cameras. Like, this is back before everyone had drones. Dude had a camera in someone's locker, I think. Like, it was just weird. At least my school bullies settled for leaning out the window of the bus and screaming hate at me. Like, that makes sense. I'm easily available. So, Daryl is, his twist that nobody sees coming because it doesn't make any sense. He's a drug runner. He runs drugs. For who, you may ask? Why, it's the final character, who is introduced at the very end of the game. We never talk to him. I don't know what he looks like. I think he was a shadowy figure. Maybe he was animated. I have no mental image of this person.
Okay. Before we talk about that guy, though, I just want to say, when you confront the diner guy...
Oh yeah,
Daryl,
it's so awkward.
When you confront him,
Oh.
he starts talking as if he's guilty. Like, literally, as if he is about to murder you for finding him out.
Yeah. And then it kind of switches.
He goes, it didn't have to be this...
like this.
Yeah.
And that whole spiel, and then it like turns...
And during that entire exchange, he has the same cheesy grin on his face, even though I'm pretty sure there are unique frames of animation specifically for this exchange.
Yeah. It's real awkward.
Yeah, and honestly, rewatching it, the way the lines are structured it almost feels like he was originally going to be the villain. And that they
Yes.
rewrote it to have this random guy just pop up at the end.
I agree. Because it doesn't make sense.
Because he talks as if he's the guilty one and he's giving his confession. And then immediately instead incriminates the other guy in the next audio line.
And then talks about how sad he is that Nancy's investigating and he doesn't want to see her get hurt. And this is a dangerous guy, Nancy. And like, I kind of understand because you confront him in a diner and that's a weird place to have a climax. Happy Days, murder at 12. Like, it's just... It also makes it weird if the murderer is a teenager. Because they are teenagers.
I think the other guy was a student as well.
If he was a student...
I think he was supposed to be... We just weren't given enough information about him, but
I don't
the
think... Because he was a drug person. Like, it sounded like he was the big leagues, kind of. I'm looking this up.
I don't know. It's possible.
Because and he didn't look or sound like a teenager, which admittedly means nothing.
Did he say anything?
Yeah, like, I'm gonna kill you or something. When did they say that was?
Huh?
Mitch was the school's boiler serviceman.
Really?
Yeah, and he's running a drug transport ring from the local pharmaceutical joint. And so Jake caught footage of the transaction between Mitch and Daryl and decided to blackmail an adult criminal. Jake was an idiot.
But no, the bad guy being someone we never met prior. This is not the first time Her Interactive pulled this, but it's such a tease. Because it...
I'm going to say it's not the worst.
It's not it's not the worst that they
up.
did. But I'm just saying that part of the fun of these games is who did it, you know?
Yes.
It's the whodunit aspect of it. And you just sort of feel robbed when, oh, well, it's some character we never even heard of until now.
Well, that's not entirely true, but we'll cover that later.
Confronting the murderer ourselves instead of going to the police was remarkably stupid.
Yeah, the setup for this was bad. Like, at least in other games, there's often a reason. Like, you're snowed in somewhere, you're stuck
The bad guy is confronting you.
Yeah.
You know,
you've tried going to the police. They
typically try...
You've been arrested.
They typically try to write in a reason why you can't just call in the police. But with this one, it's literally a premeditated confrontation.
So premeditated that she goes and tells each of the other suspects what's going on.
She tries to rally their help.
Yeah, she's like, I could go to the police, or Aunt Eloise, who is already clearly willing to commit murder. So after trying to rally the underage students to help her take down a murderer.
Yeah, a drug runner murderer.
Who's already shown that he doesn't care about killing teenagers. The doc is like, no.
Implicitly have, like, hours between doing this and, like, when they're...
Because the showdown
takes place at night. They have ample time to contact the police. And there is one line where they try and use the excuse of, oh, they need more evidence.
But they really don't.
Yeah, no.
They have literal... Of all
they
of
have
Nancy
an eyewitness. Get the diner guy to confess.
They don't even need his confession, because the thing that she finds is the video cassette that was cleverly hidden in the air ducts. I guess, because that's smart.
Because, okay, here's the thing. The killer is the one who traps you in
The
boiler
boiler
room.
So that you have to escape through the place where he hid the incriminating evidence that shows that he's the murderer.
Okay, this is all very much Scooby-Doo-ish.
Hey, Scooby-Doo had way more integrity than...
The implication is that, for some reason, he was holding the tape on his person, and, it, fell out of his... a video cassette tape, fell out of his pocket that he happened to have on him as he was climbing through an air duct.
And admittedly, you'd think that what he would do with that tape is burn it?
Or otherwise destroy it.
But, movie night is a thing. Netflix wasn't around yet, so we're not counting this as a plot hole. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So the final showdown happens at Vandalay Pharmaceuticals, so that location finally matters. You show up, and he's Mitch, appearing for the first time, is arguing with Daryl, and he's got a gun. Not Daryl, but Mitch. But luckily, strong female character kicks it out of his hand. Which, gun safety teaches that that's what you do.
Yeah, and by the way, the action of doing that, he ends up shooting Daryl in the arm because of that.
Yeah.
Further...
Stay safe, kids.
Yeah, further giving credence to they should have just gone to the police.
But that means that now Nancy can pick up a gun, and Nancy's got a gun! That's right, for the first time
The
ever.
first and only time, Nancy's packing heat.
No more of this detective stuff. She is going full Rambo on them. I'm hoping that's the name of somebody who shoots things. It sounds like an action movie.
Yeah, he's...
Yeah, that's what she does. And so she murders him, and... Now, granted, that would make her a murderer, but it's okay. She covers her tracks by killing Daryl and Connie. And she takes them all back to the school and pushes them down the stairs so that it will look like whoever killed Jake also killed them. And
Dang,
she won't be...
A lot of people are falling down steps with, shot wounds to the back of their head. Oh my gosh.
It's crazy. But Nancy isn't a suspect because she wasn't even in Florida for the first one. So she's like, "Dear Dad, I've wrapped up another case and only 3 body bags to show for it."
Okay, to be clear... Oh, man.
No, unfortunately,
Yeah, you point the... Well, what you do is realize you have to pick up the gun very quickly and also click on the bad guy at a very specific moment. And then you just freeze.
I have you surrounded.
Yes, I have you surrounded.
And he's
And
like,
I feel-
"Oh, darn it."
I feel, and by the way, I feel like a adult drug runner, if we're saying he's an adult.
He is.
I'm saying that an adult drug runner, even if we had a gun, I feel like he would still try and get the gun from you.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter that we have a gun, or even that we're female. Right now, he's in fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
And we triggered fight mode.
It ends
dumb.
up working fine in the story.
I'm not saying I'd rather see Nancy kill a man, but...
But the thing is that without police backup, what are they even going to do at that point?
she just walks
Hey!
in.
hey, this girl who just came into town, she has the killer at gunpoint. Please come here. Like,
that's a good point. Yeah, like, they went in with no plan, and then they exited. The game just ends at that point, and, dear Dad, I successfully succeeded. Yours sincerely, Nancy.
Yeah, it really doesn't.
It's weak.
It's...
But it's not the worst
It will
game.
have been an intense ending as a child.
Yeah.
But, oh my gosh.
But does it hold up to adult
and I will
scrutiny?
say,
No.
there's blood. Like, again, Nancy Drew game. When Daryl gets shot, there's blood. Like...
Her Interactive never really figured out what age range they were going for, because again, like most things that try to target girls, that was their only thing that they were targeting.
Yeah.
They were like, how do we target girls? What age group? Doesn't matter, they're girls.
And I have more to say on that in Miscellaneous, but let's move on to gameplay for now. So, the gameplay is a variant of the Myst-like adventure game genre with a larger emphasis on dialogue and inventory puzzles. It's sort of like a mishmash of LucasArts Sierra and Myst. Like Myst, the game takes the form of a highly interactive slideshow with pre-rendered scenes, with moving objects being video sequences that play on top. Though death and failure is an option, the game has a second chance feature that, assuming there are no bugs with how the game is scripted, prevents you from ever truly losing progress. We will touch on that in just a bit. It does improve on the Myst-like genre in that in specific areas you have more frames of turning, which
It does turn.
can help you basically get a sense of the area a bit better. However, that point is nullified due to how many same-looking hallways there are, and often moving further than you'd expect, making navigation incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
The extra turning frames makes turning very tedious
Yes.
in places.
And I don't think that there's anything more to say about the pixel searching other than it is intolerable and 90% of the gameplay.
Oh yeah, all of the Her Interactive games actually do require that, even if it's some innocuous little thing, you have to look at everything. Yes. Because even if it doesn't make any sense, there might be a requirement that you looked at that thing or the game will prevent you from progressing.
Yeah, and that brings us to game stopping situations.
Yeah.
There are a lot of points in some Nancy Drew games at which point you just simply cannot do anything anymore, and it's not clear whether or not you messed up irreparably or if the game is just poorly designed and punishing you.
Yeah, so for instance, despite this being a game that we've played for years, we're fairly knowledgeable with this game.
Because it was one of the games we had as a kid. And
yeah,
so as kids, we spent a lot of time.
Somewhere in our teens, we split off as two different people, but before that we were the same kid.
We need to wrap this up before you need to take some meds. Like, every once in a while he slips into the fourth dimension, and I don't know how he got there. But, so we played it a lot, when we were little.
But replaying it recently,
you still get stuck.
We managed to get to a point where we could not trigger the next thing.
And what killed me was that I knew what the next scene was. I knew who we had to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
But talking to him wouldn't work.
So we had to resort to downloading a save. And we were, I think we discovered that probably what it was we didn't look at a vent.
Yeah, that was
The
our
vent
theory.
that was our theory. We don't even know that was
Yeah.
the thing, but that was our theory because as far as we know, because the thing is that documented, there is one dialogue option that if you say that, if you ask Daryl a certain thing, you will soft lock your game, you cannot progress. And as far as we know, we didn't ask that. So yeah.
So, but that's the sort of a problem with these games in general. Like, it's maddening in this one, it's really bad in a couple others.
So far, I think this is the only one we've replayed so far that has a literal game-breaking bug like this, where...
In terms of game-breaking bugs, yes, but there are plenty of games where you're just going to have to wander aimlessly.
Yeah, they're
until something triggers. Because these games are made to seem like you can do whatever you want. And you can, make your own story. And it's an open world. Go investigate. But it's very linear. You just aren't told what line you're supposed to be following. So if you stray from it, you might have lost.
Yeah. Almost everything you look at in this game has some sort of cipher on it, and for this type of game you'd expect it to be important to decrypt them, but several of them will spoil not only the story, but also the solution to puzzles, as few as they are, if you decode them.
Yeah,
and there's no delineation as to which ones are just,
spoilers.
Which ones are spoilers and which ones aren't.
The name of the murderer is spoiled in the first location. I am so angry. You go through her house, and one of Aunt Eloise's books is about flowers, and every letter that's a different color than the rest of the text, like it's the easiest cipher to work out, says Mitch. And so you might be thinking a few things at this point. Like, one, how does that spoil anything? You don't know anyone named Mitch. That's kind of the problem. I feel like that was their way of being like, see, this isn't just a totally new character. We wrote his name in your aunt's book. But, like, on a deeper level, why does this exist? Why put that in at all? Because all it does is potentially spoil things. And, like, when I went back to it after all these years, my only thought was... Because I was like, I don't even remember who the bad guy was. And then I saw the book and I'm like, oh yeah, it was Mitch, the character who doesn't exist. And, like, I hate that. Like, don't spoil things.
Yeah. Puzzles really weren't terribly difficult. One of the harder puzzles in the game, actually, is that boiler one. And... this game is on 2 CDs, and you don't just install all of the contents onto the hard drive, you have to swap the CDs during gameplay. And for the most part, this is set up sensibly. You go to the school, that's CD 2, you're in any of the other locations, I think, you're CD 1, except when you go into the boiler room at the school. That is inexplicably CD1. Just that one room. You go through a door and it stops you in your tracks, tells you to change CDs. On top of that, the boiler room has one of the harder puzzles. I swear there is no logic to when you can and cannot pull the levers. It depends upon
the position of each lever dictates whether you can move the other levers.
Yeah, and it's
there
just it's
is a
so
logic,
unintuitive,
it's so boring.
And it's under a time limit.
Yeah.
It's so unintuitive and it's under a time limit, and there's no sensible reason for it.
I didn't really have that big of a problem with it. My problem was just figuring out what position they were supposed to be in, because I have a hard time with angles. I thought that it was actually fairly easy. I'm like, oh, so when this one is here, I can't move these. Like, it wasn't that big of a deal for me, but...
Yeah. And going back to the CD changing, another annoying part about that is that, say your save file has you in the school, you have to have CD1 in the drive to start the game. It's not well thought out, is I guess what I'll say. You can manually bypass it by manually copying all the files over, editing a configuration file, but no one wants to do that. The U-turn, so when you exit locations, for some reason, it gives you a U-turn symbol.
Which is imagining in the room where you walk in the door and suddenly put in CD2, and you put in CD2, and you're in this tiny room, and you turn around and you look at the door, and you're like, oh, this is the door to go out, and you're like, just turn around. But then not realizing that U-turn in Nancy Drew land means use the door, and then it says put in CD1, and then you have to turn around and then put in CD2. I did that a lot as a kid.
Yeah.
So that wasn't good. That was just bad design.
And that got us when we were replaying it as well. Like,
yeah.
Oh gosh.
But luckily, this is the only game that I remember that this happens in.
Yeah. So there's the game window, which is where mostly everything happens. But then there's the UI, and for the most part, it's perfectly functional. But the scroll bars...
I knew that was what you were going to say.
Do not work consistently. You're dragging them down, and for some reason, as soon as you let go of the mouse, it'll just oftentimes just jump towards the bottom for no apparent... Like, we have played several games since this game with all the same interface, and they all do it, and I still can't figure out what the cause is. Or how to consistently not have that happen. And also, the UI has a lot of unused space, but this was likely due to technology and media constraints. Just about every Myst-like game from this era has the game window in like a small screen, and they either take the Myst approach of having it be just a small screen with a black void around it, or they would often have just the most gaudy looking interfaces imaginable.
This one is very iconic.
This one is very iconic. They did an above average job.
Yeah.
It technically wastes a lot of space, but they kind of had to do that, and I think they filled
like you're
that
in a
space.
Book,
yeah,
honestly, and I give credit where credit is due. You know, it sounds like I'm very critical of this game, but that's just because I'm trying to critically analyze it.
Yes. Yeah.
I love the Nancy Drew series, and I like most of these games. I like this one only because of nostalgia. Had I come across this game in my adult years, I would have thought no, and just been like completely not impressed. But it looks fine. That's the most I can say, yeah. I guess. It looks fine.
Yeah, no, I'll even go further. It looks good, and they also kept it with very muted colors so that it's not distracting. It looks good, but it's not distracting.
Yes.
So, good job on that. One puzzle really annoyed me by how hand-holdy it was, because we find a note, a letter from Aunt Eloise's sorority, which is a series of 4 Greek characters.
You don't get to call that hand-holding.
The names of 4 Greek characters and the keys to her safe are all Greek characters, and so I'm going, oh, this is so cool! And of course, for a game that's supposedly for children, you'd want to have, a book somewhere in the game which would, detail the Greek characters or something like that, and I was going, oh, this is such a cool puzzle! But no, literally at the top, it shows you the 4 Greek characters, and I'm like, that's so disappointing.
But you didn't figure it out, right away. So, I mean, at least it was a puzzle. So, we're giving it partial points. I thought it was... I would not have wanted to go researching Greek. There are plenty of puzzles in the future games that make you work for the...
I thought it was cool.
Here is a sign of all the nautical flags.
I felt so proud of myself for noticing that, too. Gosh.
That's
also...
That's fair. There aren't really any puzzles in this where you feel smart after having solved it.
Yeah. And so that brings us to Miscellaneous.
Oh, thank goodness. Okay.
There's a puzzle in the diner. So the only thing you ever do in the diner, there is a pipe being propped up with a pair of bolt cutters, and you have to repair it by replacing it with a ladle. What is this pipe for? It is the natural gas line for the gas stoves.
And it explodes if you don't put the ladle in.
Yeah, so first off, neither of those fixes would actually work. That pipe would be leaking like crazy if it wasn't, you would actually be better off repairing it with duct tape. And on top of that, Nancy never mentions this to anyone.
No. She's like, hey, that dangerous leak you have, I swapped the bolt cutters for a ladle, hoping that won't make a difference.
Which also the ladle would be more likely to slip, also.
Yeah, but luckily, Daryl's been flirting so hard with her that she wants him dead. This was... She's clever. She knows how to cover her tracks.
Yeah.
It's an accident.
And it's also amazingly amusing when you solve the puzzle, because from the moment you stepped into the kitchen, which, by the way, you are allowed to just waltz into the kitchen, and, for some reason there's no one working at this diner except the sleazy guy. There aren't any patrons or anything, and you're allowed to just waltz into the kitchen.
And he doesn't stop you.
But at the moment you walk into the kitchen, this intense music starts playing. And as soon as you've solved the puzzle, the intense music stops, and it's just playing this cheerful sock hop music, and it is the most, unintentionally amusing thing.
Speaking of the music, music good. The music is good in this game, except for the fact that it is short. So when I was in Aunt Eloise's house, I was listening to it and I was like, I really dig this. It's kind of nostalgia, but it also fits. And then it looped, and I'm like, what? And I counted it out. There are 12 measures, 4 beats per measure, and then it loops.
Yeah, the music is good. Low audio quality, but good. It's just, the problem is that they have maybe 6 tracks in the entire game, if you don't count the jukebox tracks.
I do not.
In the diner.
I do not.
They have maybe 6 tracks in the entire game. All of them are very short, and whenever you're in a location, it's just going to be looping the exact same track for the entire duration that you're in that location.
Yeah.
So the music is good, but it will get on your nerves very quickly.
The only other note that I have is a nitpick, but humor me if you will. So these games open and close with Nancy writing letters about the things. And she opens this one with her letter to Ned explaining, "Hey, I just arrived at my Aunt Eloise's case. Jake was murdered. I'm here to investigate, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to call this case Secrets Can Kill. Love, Nancy." And I'm like, funny that you'd call this Secrets Can Kill when you don't know why Jake was murdered. And in fact, you don't find out that it's because of the blackmail until very late in the game.
Yeah, it is a little...
It's dorky and on the nose, and it's fortune-telling.
I mean, yeah.
And it's a small critique. It doesn't ruin the story in any way. It just kind of makes you go, huh. Okay.
Yeah.
A little weird.
Oh, if you want ultimate nitpick, I put down, it didn't have the classic Nancy Drew theme yet.
How dare they not have created
the main menu theme from, I think, literally the next game forward is so iconic that you start this game up, being super used to the series, and it's like, that's not the right song! The main menu is supposed to have the other song!
Yeah.
Like, this song isn't bad, but... So, recently, I found out a bit about Her Interactive's past. So, Her Interactive's previous game, which was their second game ever, before making this, was a tie-in with the book series The Vampire Diaries.
We won't be getting into that. Jenny Nicholson has already covered the whole thing.
Yeah, no, we but it does explain the odd tone of this game. Because you think Nancy Drew, you think a series for young girls. But this series, it started out with a murder mystery, and throughout the series, the game constantly,
it goes from
flirted
super juvenile, I'm not going to say aiming at kids, I'm going to say it goes, juvenile Scooby-Doo level to, a mother was murdered.
Yeah, they do
and
consistently end up making... Well, they did consistently end up making games that seemed to be targeted at a slightly older audience than what you'd expect.
They never really figured out what they were trying to do with these games, because are these puzzle games or are they mystery games? Mm-hmm. And I will argue, based on the evidence of having played them, that they are neither. And the community on Reddit supports this theory, because a lot of people hate the only good mystery game that Her Interactive ever accidentally, I'm sure, made, which is Alibi and Ashes. And we'll get into that much, much later.
Yeah, much, much later. That's one of the later games.
But they're upset because it doesn't have a lot of puzzles. And I'm like, Nancy Drew wasn't walking around solving flippin' Rubik's Cubes. She was a detective. Oh my gosh, that would be going... I didn't like the video game about Indiana Jones. There weren't enough sliding block puzzles. It's what does that have to do with Indiana Jones? No, that wouldn't be a valid criticism.
Well, I'd argue that has more to do with Indiana Jones, but whatever. Also,
for a while, Her Interactive pretended to be a edutainment company.
Oh, yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah.
That was
you can see them grappling with that. Honestly, even in this game, because they had a bunch of, they want you to learn Braille. They flirt with the idea of teaching you the Greek alphabet. I
think you learn Morse code to solve one of the puzzles, but that puzzle, there's no point
Yeah.
in solving it. So
Yeah,
like,
I
who
think
cares?
that's one of the
Yeah.
one of the optional ciphers. So they do flirt with being edutainment, but they never really were.
No.
Um,
They just had things that you had to read.
Yeah.
Or that you could read.
Yeah, and I do also want to mention that up to this point, Her Interactive had only made 2 games, and they were both live action FMV games, which really explains why they went the way they did with this game, making it a mist-like, and probably to cut costs, honestly, instead of having live action footage, just 2D animate the characters. So I just find that an interesting little perspective on why did they go this route.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like, all in all, it was...
Yeah, it was...
It was a solid start to what would become a roller coaster of a series.
Honestly,
it stumped the tracks
a
at this
successful...
point.
Let's be fair. A successful series.
Oh, very.
They weren't always the best thing that they could have been, but it was a successful series.
And they benefited from having absolutely no competition because no one else was trying to make
yeah.
mystery games for girls.
I mean, okay, here's the thing. You look at their first game, you find out that, as I recall, it was a success, and then you look up gameplay of that game and you go, oh wow, that like they were really targeting a market that had no games.
And
because if there were any competition in that market at the time, that game would not have been a bestseller.
But it's kind of the brilliance too. Like, I can't blame them for like I said, if there was anything better, then yeah, we could be harsher, but
yeah.
This is it. If you want to play a girl detective game.
Yeah, honestly, yeah.
Don't start with Secrets Can Kill. That's just my...
Yeah, no. Oh, and something I probably should have mentioned when I mentioned the Vampire Diaries game. That game obviously uses the exact same engine as this game and the later Nancy Drew games. And that shows you a very clear example of what I was talking about before with this style of game, typically having extremely gaudy looking interfaces. That thing is ugly as sin. Show the footage. I probably already had footage showing, but
Yeah.
But anyway,
This is the part of the video where we rank the game according to all of the other games that we've reviewed. And I have to say, I'm going to have to put this one at the bottom of the list. Where are you placing it?
I don't know. I think I'm going to put somewhere like in the middle.
That makes sense. And
Maybe just a little to the side. A little further. Yeah.
it's encroaching on my territory.
Fine.
Better.
So I hope you enjoyed this experiment. We are only recording this one now, and we will see if it turns into an actual video.
My laptop is gonna die. I'm a murderer.
Oh no! You pushed him down the stairs.
Oh no! I wish it hadn't come to this. Oh, okay.
Oh gosh.
Anyway, bye-bye.